What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Binge Empire, part of the Bingetown TV podcast network. And this is going to be our coverage of HBO's A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So this is episode 4, titled Seven, just 7. And we will obviously talk about why. A lot of fun things to talk about here. Crazy episode. Absolutely loved it. But I'm Kyle. I've been here throughout the season. I guess you could say maybe resident book researcher. You know, the wikis get a lot of work from me on my computer. I won't say I'm a subject matter expert, but I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Paul. So Paul's joining us in place of Luke, who's on vacation right now. So Paul, I'm going to give you the floor to just talk a little bit about your experience with the show so far before we just dive headfirst into all these scenes.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I am Paul. For those looking on YouTube, you can see this show inspired me. I caught an injury training to become a squire, not to become a knight. I was training to become a squire. Yeah, so I am not on the same level of Game of Thrones knowledge, of course, as Kyle. I would say I'm much less than Luke as well. I am more of a casual Game of Thrones fan. I still love everything about it, but I am not a grasper of history such as the one accompanying me now. So I will be asking questions aplenty, but it is still such a pleasure to talk anything Game of Thrones. I love this world. I'm surrounded by high level conversations of it, just, being part of Binge Empire. So, I can hang in some conversations here. And it's been just a joy to see the crossover between this show, The House of the Dragon, the original Game of Thrones. And it's been a joy to watch these two main characters because, Egg episode 1 didn't get a whole lot. By episode 2 and 3, I fell in love with him. And then this episode, even more. Everything he does is just for Duncan. And Dunk, a character after my own heart, right? He is just good to the core. So good. The opening scene, a rat is coming in out of the rain in his cell and he starts petting it because that is just the kind-hearted man he is. So love to see that in this Game of Thrones world of just everybody being a dick. So I cannot wait to talk about the events of this episode.
Yeah, you would have stood for him. I know. At the end
yeah,
of this episode, you would have
definitely.
stood for sure. Okay. So yeah, like you mentioned too, that was a good segue also into kind of the initial conversation we'll have. So I just have it kind of bucketed into both of these things. So we have Dunk sitting in his cell and Egg comes in to deliver some food and word that Prince Baelor wants to see him. Dunk and Egg kind of have their moment that they needed to have in the aftermath of all of this. Dunk's a little pissed at Egg, deservedly or undeservedly so. And then Dunk and Prince Baelor have a conversation that they need to have in the aftermath of last episode. Two fantastic conversations, one emotional, one maybe a little less emotional, but still very important. I loved both of these scenes. It's tough to see our boy Egg so sad, man. When he's just little curled up in the corner of the cell, it was tough to watch, honestly.
Yeah, well, when he first comes in full Targaryen garbs, which he absolutely rocks the shit out of, he looks so good. Such a difference, such a juxtaposition between the rags he had on earlier. And you nailed it. This was so tough, right? You and Luke were kind of talking last recording about what will be the direct aftermath because Dunk does feel betrayed in a way. And you see it here. He's just yelling at him. He's like, you knew everything that you were doing was wrong. That's why you lied in the first place. But you can see how upset Egg is getting. And, the next scene, as soon as he goes in with Baelor, Dunk's like, he's not going to spill wine. He's a good kid. He's a great squire. He reminds me of Ted Mosby, where he's like going through like, how would you punish your kid? And he's like, all right, no TV. You're grounded. All right, fine, TV, but no dessert. Okay, dessert, but no sprinkles. All right, sprinkles, let's go. And like they hop in the car. Like that's what that felt like. Like Duncan was trying his best to reprimand him because yes, Egg was wrong, but every time he tries to scold him, he just feels bad about it. And immediately you could see it. So I loved this scene. And then I loved Baelor too. Like first question, like how good of a knight are you? Just right to the point before you can even explain anything. He's already just trying to help Dunk out. So there was a lot going on in that conversation. More talking about, Egg and Mycar and the whole relationship of the Targaryens and brothers. So there was a lot to break down, but what a good start to this episode.
Yeah, I mean, Dunk deservedly, I think, in my opinion, is upset at being lied to, and but just looking over and seeing Egg crying, and when he says like, "I just wanted to be somebody's squire, sir," I was like, "Oh." And even Dunk at that point is kind of like, "Oh," you can see him like the body language. He kind of relents a little bit,
Yeah,
and I also think that I think Dunk needed to like let some frustration out for sure. But when me and Kathleen talked about it in episode 1, in that, and we'll talk about it later here because there's a big piece of evidence for it, is that Dunk himself is lying. Dunk
yeah,
has never been knighted, and he knows that about himself. So I think part of this was as well him kind of being like upset at Egg for lying, and then he's kind of just thinking like, well, I'm also lying myself, and he kind of, maybe they come to, Egg isn't aware of that, but I think Dunk, I think internally comes to a little bit of an understanding of being like, how can I actually be like this mad at him for lying when I'm kind of doing the same thing myself. And that leads us, yeah, right into this conversation with Prince Baylor here. And I think it's very easy at the end of last episode, and I would say, again, probably correct, to be like, Arian's an asshole, like so overboard. But I think people maybe had potentially a little bit of pause when Baylor is like, well, honestly, the puppet show wasn't smart. Like, it wasn't wise. Like, that's really not something she should have been doing. And Arian's an idiot. But I mean, they kind of, not necessarily victim blaming, but like put themselves in a situation for something to happen by doing that puppet show.
yeah. I mean, he says the dragon is the sigil of the royal house. Like, how dare you even put on a play to show a dragon's weakness? And Dunk kind of rebuttals that with like, well, she was just an innocent girl. Like, wouldn't you have done the same? And Baylor's response is, yeah, I might have, but I'm a prince. I'm an heir to the throne, not a hedge knight. And Dunk's response to that is, all knights make the same oath. It doesn't
Yep.
matter. Protect the innocent. And this definitely, I feel like, hooks Baylor into, the end of the episode. But it's just so refreshing to see a man with power in this world just have ethics and morals. Like, Baylor is such a good person to be heir to the throne. So it's refreshing that, Dunk can be honest and it actually leads to not horrible and death. Yet. It might. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, think too, like Dunk is a criminal really at this point. He hasn't had a trial, but he put his hands on a royal prince, and he's just chilling in Baylor's personal chambers with a cup of wine, and they're honestly arguing. Like, this is a genuine argument that they're having right now, and Baylor's not so proud within himself to like not allow that to happen. He's just, I thought that was a great way to show too of just like his character. He's just so good, and he knows, like you said from the start, that like this is gonna come down to a trial by combat. you know that's why
Mhm.
he's asking him, how good of a knight are you truly. It's kind of just the idea of, you're gonna have to go to this trial, Dunk, and you're gonna have to demand a trial by combat, or we're gonna have to cut your hand and your foot off. So maybe not
Yeah.
die, but he's gonna lose a hand and a foot, and from his perspective, that's almost as good as dying. I mean, he's a knight. This is what he wants to do, and there's not many one-handed knights. Jamie Lannister was a one-handed shell of a knight, and I don't think there's any knights with only one hand and one foot. So it's kind of his
Yeah.
life on the line here.
Yeah. I like the way the Baylor put that. Was like, Arian wants your head. He's not going to get it. But the last person that struck a Targaryen lost their hand, and you kicked them too, didn't you? And Dunk was like, yeah, I did. Like, not going to lie, I kicked him. So like you said, it's basically like your life's over at that point. So trial by combat, or it's funny because it's either like put your life on the line by trial of combat, or basically live a miserable life. So Dunk's like, all right, that's what I got to do.
I mean, yeah, some people would rather go down with a sword in hand. That's
Oh yeah.
much more honorable way to go out in a lot of people's minds. And the last thing I have here in this conversation, I just really want to call out the line of, I think it's Dunk saying to Baylor, he didn't really intend to do any harm with it. And it's like Baylor's kind of response of, one need not intend harm to do it. So Egg's intentions might have been good, but the outcome is the outcome itself, and they have to kind of deal with that. So that's a little lesson for the young prince potentially there.
Foreshadowing, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Could be. All right. So now we have the I guess the pre-trial, maybe the trial itself. It's basically just Dunk is now in a room with the lords that will be judging him per se. We've got Lord Ashford, we've got Lord Leo Tyrell, we've got Prince Baelor, Prince Maekar, and then the aggrieved party, I guess you could say. We've got Prince Arion. Dunk demands a trial by combat. Arion flips it into a trial of 7, and I guess kind of chaos a little bit ensues rather in the room. There's questions. We're dismayed. We're learning things about history though too. There's a kind of a lot going on in this conversation.
Yeah, Arion, Luke nailed it when he talks about him. He makes such a statement just being on screen. His look, his scowl. We know about how evil some of these men can be. Especially Targaryens. He's keeping that family tradition alive. It feels like, and he's such a little shit too. He's like, nah, I refuse to trial by comment. And his dad is like, you can't refuse. What the hell are you talking about? And Makar was so funny here because he just kind of felt he said what I thought as a viewer. It's like you can't just refuse. And so Arian goes on to, a trial of 7, and Makar's like, what the fuck is a trial of 7? And I'm like, yeah, what is a trial of 7? And they don't even give it to us right away. It gets to the point where Dunk is like, are you telling me I'm gonna have to fight 7 other people? And Arian's like, all right, don't play the fool. Like, it's gonna be 7v7, but I didn't know that either. So just it felt like such a meta conversation because they were asking questions that we as viewers wanted, and it was still suspenseful. And I think the chestnuts or the walnuts, whatever,
Yeah.
he's breaking and he drops one, and Arian tells Ashburn, right, to like go down and fetch it for him. It's just like he is just a spoiled shit, and the way he got dragged out by his dad was great. It was great.
Some people have an issue with the way that they've characterized Makar book readers. This is he kind of seems not like a fool, but he's not like he's both serious and not. And I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think he should have been the one to be like, what's a trial of 7? Because if I recall correctly, in the book, he's actually the one that like talks about it.
Mm.
But and because I feel like the question, like you're saying the meta level question, like Dunk asks it. So it could have just been Dunk asking the meta level question. But I think they've done a good job of kind of characterizing his situation, Makar this is. So they haven't talked. Oh, they have actually, because Egg mentions to Dunk that his mom is dead. So that's true. So Makar at this point is a single dad with 4 boys that are just rabble rousers. Daron's his eldest, doesn't want anything to do with anything. Daron the drunken. He's got Aemon, like we talked about last episode. They're sending Aemon to the Citadel. Arion is Arion, obviously, that we've seen. I mean, he's naturally a handful, and then he's got Egg, and it's just kind of like he's just probably a little exasperated rather as a dad. He's just like, I'm struggling out here. I'm trying to contain these kids. They are just hell bent on kind of tarnishing the honor almost of House Targaryen, and because Arion says, it's a matter of honor, and Makar says, oh, like you want to talk about honor, and then he gets up and he drags him out of the room, like you said, and he's just a single dad, just trying his best, it seems, and it's just not really going so well for him.
Yeah, that's a good point. The show doesn't make him seem like a fool. It just makes him feel like as you said it, he just can't keep his kids in order,
Yeah.
and therefore he is almost flustered in a lot of situations himself. But I do like the fact that he cares about tradition and honor, and he even says like, Aaron, like, why are you hiding behind a 6,000-year-old Andel foolery just because you're afraid to fight this hedge knight? And Aaron tries to say it's like, oh well, Darren was wronged as well, so he needs to answer for both. But even my car is just like, dude, it's so stupid. Like, come here, you little shit, and drags him out to reprimand him by himself in the other room.
Yeah, deserved. I mean, I can't imagine Aaron being your son. I'd be like, get this fucking guy out of here. But we learn a little bit here about what a trial of 7 is. They mention that it's from the Andals. The show has done a pretty good job of. So last episode we have Raymond Fossaway being like, these guys came over the ocean. They pretty much took a piss on our culture, enslaved our people, and the Targaryens here in this scene, Maekar specifically, is kind of like the Andals, like, fuck the Andals. But so anyone that is confused about it, The Andals are an ethnic group that came from Essos. So we're currently on Westeros. Essos is the continent that Daenerys spends most of her time on in the Game of Thrones show. They came over to kind of settle onto Westeros, whatever it might be, 6,000 years ago. At that point, it's just kind of the first men, which is kind of the Starks, our first men ancestors. And then we have the Children of the Forest, the little green people from the Game of Thrones show. Those were the two people living on Westeros. The Andals came over with fire, sword, and the faith of the Seven. So that's their religion that they brought over. And the Targaryens aren't Andals. So to them, too, it's like, fuck the Andals. Like, I don't really care. But the Andals have become a very significant ethnic group. The faith of the Seven, obviously, is the dominant religion in Westeros. And it's just showing a bit more of that disconnect between the Targaryens as the ruling dynasty and they're kind of the special case, and then the actual people that they rule. So it's just like kind of another way to do that. Also, if anyone is kind of remembering of Game of Thrones, when they announce all the kings and queens for Daenerys, they're always, the king of the Andals, the Rhaenyra, and the First Men. Those are just the ethnic groups within Westeros. The Rhaenyra are people that came across the narrow sea, again, from Essos, same continent that the Andals have come from. They settled in Dorne, and they have like it's this whole immigration story. They were led by Nymeria. That's the kind of heroine, the warrior princess that Arya names her direwolf after. And also that is going to be one of the upcoming future spin-off shows. They're going to make a show about Nymeria crossing with the Rhaenyra to settle in Dorne and become eventually part of the Seven Kingdoms and things like that. So a lot of history going on here in not a lot of words, but that's kind of, just the depth and the richness of this world itself. There's just like a lot going on there. I think naturally a lot of us are, fans of the Starks and the First Men, the old gods, not these new fake Seven gods. But as Baylor says, the idea here is that if 7 men fight on each side, one for each one of the 7 gods, then the gods will be more likely to rule justly, and favor whatever outcome.
That does clear up something for me though, because when Balar is explaining that, and Mykar's like, well, if it's the Andals that made it up, I thought he was saying that like, oh, we need to respect that because I respect the Andals. But he was like, oh, sarcasm. Like, oh, it's got to be important. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So he was like taking a jab at it and said, this is stupid. This is an old, stupid tradition.
Exactly, yes, because they are Valyrians. They're the blood of old Valyria, the completely different settlement in Essos. They're not Andals themselves. Most people in Westeros at this point, like most people in like the Riverlands and, the Lannisters from Castle Rock, just kind of most of the people are Andals, while the Starks in the north are kind of isolated to their First Men. And a lot of the Dornish people in the south that are pretty isolated, they are kind of the Rhaenyra. So, yeah, a little bit of a lesson there. And then that's kind of a great way to wrap this up is going to be the line here of Dunk being like, well, I really only know myself and my bald squire who's 9. So it's like, how am I going to find 6 more people? And then the line of, if a cause is just, men will fight for it. If you cannot find enough men, it must mean you are guilty, which is just ridiculous to think about. But that's the situation that we are currently in. That's what we leave the room with. Of, all right, we got to find 6 guys to fight with us against, the prince of one of the princes of the realm.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, he's got Lionel Baratheon. Maybe he can rope in because they've become such bros. But other than that, I'm like, he has nobody. Like, he's going to have to basically stand in the street with a sign saying, like, fight for me. But thank God, it goes back to his horses and who's there but Raymond. And I know they became close over the past, couple days while they've camped here at the tourney. But the way that they embraced in a hug, like, I know Raymond was like, oh my God, like, you're alive. I'm happy to see you. But that hug, I was like, man, you guys really connected. So it's refreshing to see that as many people that were shitting on Dunk just walking around when he first got there, he was at least able to find a few good people with his good heart. And, Raymond is one of them.
Yeah, Raymond's just a good guy,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's an interesting point too, that they didn't really spend like a ton of time together, but it wasn't up because, like you said, Dunk's just kind of a genuine guy. I think it's very easy to root for him, both us as watchers and viewers, and then it seems like people within the world as well. And yeah, Raymond is a fucking beast. And he also expressed a lot of those political opinions to Dunk. So maybe he feels like, all right, we're boys now. We're connected. I showed you a little part of my soul there that maybe was better to keep away in polite society, but now we're kind of locked in. And we go back to the Fossaway tent, and we have potentially the surprise of the episode until he's a dickhead about it later, but we have Sir Stefan, who we've learned, according to Raymond, I think has the honor of a cornered weasel or whatever, or a wounded weasel or whatever he says last episode. And he steps up and is like, I got you, bro. I got you. And he says a lot of the nice words. There's a lot of great things that he's saying to Dunk right here. And we kind of leave Stefan with, he's like, all right, I'm going to talk to Sir Lionel. I'm going to talk to Lord Lannister. And I'm going to talk to Sir Otho Bracken. And we're going to get after this.
Such a surprise, right? I was like, where did this come from? But like you said, Stefan's talking about how, he does want to protect the innocent, and us Fossways have been here long before those dragons came to our shores. So you shan't die under my watch, sir. I promise you that. And I'm like, I want this guy's confidence, man. This is fucking insane. I love the switch up from his introduction, but it just makes it so much better for the end of the episode, and we'll get there. But yeah, I mean, it's looking up. He walks out of the tent. He's like, "Don't worry, I'm gonna wrangle up some boys. We're gonna handle this. You shan't die under my watch." And that's not what happened.
No, definitely not. And I think the line too, you feel quite confident of, and especially, I don't actually even remember if it's in the book, but I feel like this would be something to latch onto when he says, and I love it, I'm sure we can find 5 more good men who wish singers to make them immortal.
Yeah,
And it's
that was
like,
a good
yeah,
one.
I love when that's kind of like the mindset of like fantasy books and things like that. It's just guys that are just, again, like dying with a sword in their hand. Let's make at least my death worthy of a song and stuff. And it was like, all right, he's leaving with this idea in his head. Like, he's obviously going to find 5 guys. Like, we'll just see who kind of shows up in the morning. But we then get after Stefan leaves. Egg and Daron kind of come into the tent, and then I feel like the vibe goes down. Like, Stefan leaves, and we're kind of maybe feeling good, and then the vibe goes down here because Egg and Daron show up, and they're like, "Okay, Makar's gonna fight with Arion. Oh, and the 3 Kingsguard members are gonna fight with Daron, or Arion rather." And then they're like, "Well, who do you got?" And Dunk's like, I got Sir Stefan, and then just like the dead air and the looks on Egg and Daron's faces were so good. And then we learned some choice things about
Yeah.
Arion too.
Yeah. So Daron, obviously, he was the drunk in the first episode, but we I loved this scene because we learn so much more about him. Like we heard a lot about him, people talking down about him, saying it's a drunk, and then we got him, and it's just what they said. But he has so much personality to it too. He just like leans into it. He doesn't care. Dunk's got the knife to his throat, and he's like, "You lied. You painted me out to be a villain." And Darren's like, "Well, I had to say something when my dad came at me. Like, what? You wanted me to take the blame? I'll never do that." So we also got the line afterwards. He's like, "Hey, Dunk, can I get a private word with you?" And he talks about how he dreams and his dreams come true. And what he said is he saw a fire and a dead dragon, a great beast with wings so large it could cover this meadow, and it falls on top of you. And he says, like, was the dragon dead? I think they didn't know if he was dead or if it was Dunk that killed it.
Second one.
Correct. Okay. So it is a dead dragon that falls on him. And I have no idea what this means, right? Because earlier this season, they're just talking about how there haven't been dragons in a while. I know there's fans out there that have lore that probably can connect it. The only thing I had is right before they step outside to have this private conversation, you know, Darren says, Arion thinks he's a dragon in human form. And the way that they talk about these prophecies, you talked about it last episode. The one woman said, Dunk, you're going to be richer than a Lannister. Does that mean money or does that mean something else? When they say a dragon falls upon him, does that mean like an actual dragon or does it mean somebody who, embodies the dragon? So that was my one kind of guess for whatever this prediction means, but no idea. It all goes over my head.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was good to connect it to that quote from in the 10 because, yeah, that's who he's fighting at this point. You know what I mean? He's battling the other champions, but at the end of the day, Daron doesn't really care about the accusation. They're admitting he's going to take a fall basically in the trial. There's a funny quote from the books where he's basically like, you know, people talk about my drinking and, you know, my brothers are knights and all this stuff, but like none of my brothers would be better than me than like falling face first into the mud and staying down. So like that's kind of the plan here, is that he doesn't care. He says like I never asked anyone to defend my honor. Like it's whatever here. So he's basically not counting in the math. So it's really Dunk against Arion here, and also kind of their kind of worldviews. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to kind of equate it right to that quote that we get right before. I mean, they're also kind of just describing. We know that Arion's kind of a dickhead, and it's even worse, really, than what we have been able to infer. I mean, Egg's story from when they're little, he talks about how he used to get into his bed and kind of threaten to castrate him because, you know, he has too many brothers at this point. He needs a sister to marry because, you know, Targaryens do that and crazy stuff. And then Raymond kind of laughs, and then they kind of look at him and he's like, sorry, like I didn't mean to laugh.
And Daron is like, no, like that's true. Like Arion is a monster. So
yeah. And then us here, cats, we have cats.
Yeah.
He just threw Egg's cat down a well.
Yeah. I hated that. I was like, well, first, a few episodes ago when Arion does joust, and I'm like, there's no better way to introduce a villain than have him killing an innocent animal, right?
Yep.
So killing the horse was obviously a way to be like, yo, screw this guy. This story about the cat too, it's just like, yeah, that's just like that's a evil guy just killing, you know, innocent animals. But the way that Daron kind of was like, all right, like stop talking so much about it, made me think. I was like, did Daron throw the cat in the well? Will that even matter? Will that come back? Who knows? But Daron is a drunken shit, so who knows what happens and goes on.
Yeah, I mean, Daron's so self-deprecating that you would feel like maybe he would admit it, but he's also a slimy little guy, it seems like, where he will just avoid responsibility for things for the most part. He does kind of apologize to Dunk, though, at the end of this, where he's kind of like, hey, man, if my lie kills you, sorry. You know, he kind of is accepting like I'll end up in some hell somewhere, and I'm sure he won't have wine, which will be the worst possible thing for him. I think an important thing that we learn here. So we learned it in the first episode when he says, I dreamed of you, but we're not entirely sure who he is at that point. But he tells us here straight up that he is a dreamer. So he is kind of plagued by these dreams that give him visions of the future. Like we just talked about, they're not like explicit sometimes, but his dreams do come true. And that's a big reason why he is kind of just the way that he is. He's just saddled with this prophetic power that he didn't ask for, and it's definitely plays a role into his drinking and kind of just the way that he doesn't seem to really care about being a prince and a knight and all of this stuff. He's just kind of so bogged down by these visions that are kind of granted to him.
Yeah, I mean, I would drink too.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it would be too fun. That this is a common trait for, well, okay, that's not the right way to say it, but there are Targaryen dreamers besides Daron. So this isn't like the first time this has ever been introduced. Daenerys the Dreamer is like a famous Targaryen. This was before Aegon the Conqueror's time. She kind of foresaw the doom of Valyria, which is the old like big empire dragon civilization that the Targaryens were just one house member of, but she saw the doom happening. So that's why the Targaryens, for the most part, kind of moved out of Valyria before it happened. They're like the last surviving Valyrian family because of Daenerys the Dreamer. She had the vision. She saved the family. Daenerys has some dreams within the books. Maester Aemon has, I think, one or two. It's a little less explicit. Apparently, Aegon the Conqueror, too, had some. So, like, this is a trait that is kind of in the bloodline of the Targaryens. They're a little magical in that way, but obviously it really impacts Daron and kind of the way that he operates within the world. And I would be remiss not to mention the quick apple thing we get here because of the Fossaways. When Daron does say the thing about Aaron thinks he's a dragon in human form, and he just says pity he wasn't born a Fossaway, then he'd think he was an apple and we'd all be a deal safer. Just quite funny. Raymond was actually a little salty about that. He kind of stepped up to him, but it gets diffused pretty quickly. Okay, so Daron walks away. Now we've got Dunk. He then kind of wanders into the puppet tent. He's thinking of Tansel. Maybe he's looking for the shield. And the legend, the boy, the unsung potential hero of the situation, Steely Pate, comes by, takes him under his wing a little bit, gets him out of the rain, shelters him, gives him a little bit of a pep talk, gets his armor going. So this was just like a nice little island scene here.
Yeah. Dunk goes and picks up the head of Florian the Fool, and he kind of hears Tansel's voice as she, was giving the play. I feel like there's a connection there. It's just, a one to one, basical, like you could put each story side by side and they would have a lot in common. I don't know, but Steely Pate, I wonder if they knew that he was just going to have just a fan favorite following for not being like a main character. He's just the man. He's like, oh yeah, she left the shield with me. Come on, gives it to him. He's got redid the outside edges and threw on some straps, and he's just like, hey man, from you, all I want is a copper. And
Yep.
even like before the copper line, he gives him the shield, and Dunk is so down that he looks at the painting and he's like, man, this is just reeks of death. It's the stars falling and the night is turning to dusk. Like this is basically just an omen. And Steely's just like, hey man, look at those leaves. Those are green, man. That tree is alive. So those are summer leaves. I'm like, man, that's exactly what Dunk needed. This was just like the perfect find randomly that Dunk was able to make a connection with a few days earlier. That's just paying off so well.
Yeah, and this is almost not like the opposite of some lessons that maybe we learned from the original series, but I feel like a big takeaway that people have from the Game of Thrones TV show, maybe the first book, specifically around Ned Stark, is that Ned Stark's so honorable and he's such kind of like a good guy and he doesn't really get rewarded for it. It's just a world that punishes people that try to hold to their principles and be honorable and things like that. But this is kind of showing us here that Dunk's authenticity and his just really simple principle of a knight defends the innocent and the weak, and he is who he is. He's not scheming. He's not, trying to do anything the wrong way. He just wants to live and do things the right way. And he's getting benefits from it. And that's just a nice
Mm.
thing to see. Steely Pate seems to recognize that he's just like a good guy who needs some help. And he's more than willing to help someone like that. So yeah, the copper price is so good. I also love the shield rhyme. So, naturally books, especially fantasy books, there's a lot of introspection and we get a lot of like internal thoughts. I love that they brought this into this of just oak and iron, guard me well, or else I'm dead and doomed to hell. We'll be seeing that in the future. Anytime we're in fights or jousting and things like that, it's just like one of those little mantras that is just in your mind before you're going into a battle to kind of psych you up and trust yourself and all that stuff. So I'm just really glad that they threw this in here.
Yeah, I love that. I love just the childhood rhymes, if you will, that they live by, and it just builds the world so much for something so small. And the only other thing I think Steely said that Tansel went back to Dorne.
Yep.
So don't know if we'll get more of her. I really hope we do, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like the show will be the short term. Maybe, I know there is the adventures of Dunk and Egg. So maybe, there's an adventure down the road where they reconnect, but it doesn't seem like we will get too much of her from now on. I hope we do though, because like you guys talked about, you and Luke, the chemistry, the awkward chemistry, it works perfectly. And the three of them being there together and Egg there to break the silence is just so funny.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not a love triangle, but Dunk needs Egg, so it has to be the three of them because Dunk on his own isn't getting anything done in that realm. Egg just being the ultimate wingman for him is just like the perfect setup and scenario. You can just imagine the conversations there. The last thing that I have, and I'm really glad you called that out, but they've done a really good job with some of the non-dialogue stuff in the show, just creating atmosphere, editing, directing, whatever it is, cinematography, classic word of whatever it is. But the like Tansel scream into Steely Bait, like unlocking the latch, being the substitute for the bone crack, was just so good. I hated the sound of it, but you got to tip your cap to it in the aftermath of it. Of like, damn, okay, that was nice. I like that.
I watched the episode twice today, and the second time I caught it, and I'm like, wow, you just really need to appreciate how much effort goes into this.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah, they're doing a really good job with a lot of the sound design things, and then the music, the songs, both in the world and just kind of the music that plays, which obviously we'll talk about at the end of this. A particular song that got us hyped, but yeah, there's just been so many successful elements of this show. It's just a lot of fucking fun. Okay, so now we have the next morning. We've got Dunk kind of is entering the tourney grounds where the battle is going to take place. So he arrives here, and we are able now to see who has come for him. Not necessarily thanks to Sir Stephen. We learn it's mostly thanks to Egg himself, but we see Sir Humphrey Harding. We see Sir Robin Risling. Obviously, we see Sir Lionel Baratheon. We're thinking we have Sir Stefan Fossaway. And then the other guy that's there who doesn't have any lines, to my knowledge, we've never seen him before. His name is just Sir Humphrey Beesbury. That's just a thing. That's just who he is.
I did have to look that up just to make sure that I had the teams correctly, and I believe he is brother by marriage to Sir Humphrey Harding.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Because I was counting in my head, and I'm like, I'm definitely one short. I know Fossaway like leaves, but I'm definitely one short, so I had to look it up. Yeah, I mean, this was hype. This was the boys coming together, and I mean, Lionel Baratheon loved the line of, "Yeah, man, I won't pass up a chance to bloody the Kingsguard's nice white gowns." And Dunk is like, "Man, I just thank you all for listening to Sir Stefan's call." And Lionel's like, "Sir Stefan? Like Stephen? Who the fuck is that?" Nah, it was all from your boy there, Egg or whatever. So gotta love Egg. Immediately, you're like, "What the fuck's going on with Stefan?" And Lionel is just so fucking funny. He just doesn't care. He barely pays attention, but he always like almost seems like he has a positive result. I mean, the tug of war just I feel like encapsulates him.
Yeah.
Like he just gave up. He was like, you know what? I want to drink right now. I'm kind of thirsty. And then his side kind of wins anyway. And it kind of feels like that is what his character is. He never takes anything too seriously. He loves to have, moments, his moments, but it kind of just works out for him. So I'm hoping that this fight works out for him.
Yeah, he's got a great nickname. I mean, he's the Laughing Storm. And I think that he has done a lot of acting that makes sense. Like, yeah, that's definitely why it's not the exact way that he gets the nickname in the books, but I think it's fine. I mean, his character rather has been awesome. I also just like too that in addition to the Kingsguard stuff, he says like, who's going to pass up the first trial of 7 in 100 years? I
Yeah.
mean, he's one of the people that I'm trying to get someone maybe to sing about me. He was singing about Alice of Three Fingers last episode. Maybe they'll be singing about the Laughing Storm and the Trial of 7, in another series, hundreds of years after this one. So he's got good
Yeah.
motivation for it. I like too that the I always knew you meant trouble. It's just like so funny to think of the journey that they've been on. A lot of that has been manufactured for the show. Dunk never talks to Lionel Baratheon before this moment, the trial in the books, but he was just a nice kind of addition of fleshing out a character. It makes sense that now he's kind of coming to us and kind of having our back at the end a little bit. So Robin Riesling, I feel like I've pronounced it 3 different times over the past 2 episodes. Oh well, but he was someone we met last episode, and Luke had that question of, just felt so random that this guy was there, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna say it, but he'll be back next episode basically. And I love that he kind of joins the squad here. It was smart to give him a little bit of a highlight into last episode.
Yeah, I don't have the exact quote, but I loved his line of, like I fight for or like something along the lines of like when the gods fight for the king, I'll fight for the king, but when the king turns on the gods, I fight for the gods. And I'm like,
Yeah,
love that. Just a line in the sand and he knows which side he's on.
pretty much. Yeah, with this one eye. I love how he has like the chainmail
Yeah.
like hood, whatever it is, and then it just has the thing that goes over his eye. I mean, he looks crazy in a good
I
way.
mean, they are such a ragtag group of people. Sir Humphrey still has a broken leg.
Yep.
He can only fight on horseback. Yeah, you got Sir Risling, who, again, the maddest knight in the kingdom with one eye, the laughing storm, this hedge knight nobody's heard of. Like, this is such a little thrown together squad, but I love every single one of them, and I can't wait for the fight. And yeah, we didn't even get to the absolute chills part of this episode. There was like a fake out goosebump scene and then the real goosebump scene. And obviously the fake out is all the other, the accusers, as Sir Stefan put it, come out and they're like, oh, there's only 6 of them. Sir Stefan is like, Raymond, get my horse. And this little shit, man, he's like, well, I wouldn't have become a lord otherwise. And they're
Yeah,
like, oh my God, so you threw that away to become a lord? And he's like, yeah, I've seen people throw away more to become a lord. So
it's not
it
wrong.
just, it goes back to the conversation they had earlier where Stefan was saying, when I don't have the answers, my answer is always like for more glory or whatever. And that's basically exactly what this was. So traitor alert into Raymond being the biggest ride or die, saying, knight me right now so I can fight alongside you. And it's like a two-way meaning of Dunk being hesitant here. One being, he doesn't want to be the reason for Raymond dying if he does. And then two, Lionel comes up and says, any knight can make another knight. And Sir Duncan's not really a knight. So he's like, shit, I don't want to lie again. So I'm already lying about me being a knight. So I really lie and make this guy think he's a knight as well. So I love that. And I almost feel like Lionel kind of picks up on it. And that's why he did it. I don't really know if he's that smart or if he's just rolling with the punches. But I loved that scene.
I think it is just very fortuitous timing for Dunk, is my interpretation, because Lord Ashford kind of comes out and they basically are calling the two parties, which is Arion and Dunk, to kind of come to, I guess, the center in that way. And I think it was basically just Dunk was able to stall however many seconds to get it. But man, also like, speaking of the directing and the style of the slow motion with the voiceover of Lionel knighting Raymond was just so good. I mean, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to protect the young and the innocent. And it's just like dunk check, dunk check, dunk check. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's never had that ceremony, but it's just he's checking all those damn boxes. And now we know Raymond is checking all those boxes. It's just a great moment.
And I think while that's happening too, as Dunk is walking up to Ashburn, he sees Sir Arlen in his head, and Sir Arlen just kind of shrugs and is like, kind of is what it is, man. So I just love that. And of course, he is thinking of Sir Arlen in this moment. But yeah, the speech, man, the speech was great. Like, I would have gotten up and fought with him too. And the music starts playing, and there's so many good lines. And then what is it? Sir Bracken, the brood of Bracken stands up, and the music starts playing, and I'm like, man, this is great. He inspired me. He's inspiring other people. And then the fucking satire comes in with the fart. And when I first watched it, I'm like, dude, how dare they, right? Like, I was so excited. But then, you get the crack of the door opening too, and the music starts again, and you see the Targaryen armor coming out. And my eyes, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be Arion's cousin that he was like, early on, he's like, don't worry, I don't have to embarrass you today, when he goes on to, kill the horse. And then, you see the helm come off, and it actually is Baelor, the heir to the throne, and the music is blaring, and I had absolute goosebumps. In my notes, I have like, oh my God, what? Like, chills, fucking chills. That's the only thing I could think about. It was such a good scene, and I think that the fake out before that makes it so much better. I
Yeah.
didn't like it, but on the second watch, I'm like, I think that tees it up perfectly.
Yeah, it's such a roller coaster too in this moment. We're riding up, and when we first get to the scene, it's like, okay, who is even going to be there? And then we're excited because like we've got Lionel, we've got knights that we saw Sir Humphrey Harding joust, and then we know Sir Stefan's going to be there, and it's like, all right, you know what I mean? Like, we just need one, and then Sir Stefan defects, and it's like, damn it, we need two, and then Raymond's like, knight me, and it's like, yeah, we need one. And then he's doing the plea, and then the Bruta Bracken, Sir Otto Bracken stands up, and it's like, yeah, we got 7, and then he farts, and it's like, no, we got 6, and then and the music starts, and it's just the music. It's so fucking perfect, man. And then the helm popping off, Prince Baelor Breakspear, the hammer, the hand of the king, heir to the Iron Throne. It just stands for Sir Duncan the Tall. It's just so perfect. It's exactly what you needed in that moment. This man protected the innocent, as every true knight must. Let the gods decide if he was wrong.
So good.
Let's go!
I would ride for him too, man. If both of them were like, man, come join me as my squire, I would have weeks of deciding if I would pick Dunk or Baelor, because they're just so cool, man.
You think Sir Steven's having second thoughts?
I think he doesn't really care because he's a lord now. So what I'm worried about is who the hell's gonna die, right? I don't think all 7 or all 14 are gonna make it out of here unscathed. And with the previous episode having the prophecy for Egg, saying Egg will be on the throne at one point, I'm like, okay, so how does he get there? I feel like the first thing that needs to happen is Baelor needs to die. So Maekar is next in line, and then something happens to Maekar, and it just goes down the list of through the Suns and somehow gets to Egg. But it would be heartbreaking, but very poetic if Baelor dies defending what he believes to be right and true and just in Dunk. And you were saying earlier, we're used to people with, morals and ethics being punished for it. Will that continue here, or will we get some happy ending? I don't know, but if I had to pick one to die, I feel like Baelor is the one to die, and I really don't want that.
Damn, bro, you got a cynical outlook on the world of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, I'm scared, is what it feels like, man.
Honestly, it's you're well trained for a reason. I mean, there's been a lot of people that we've liked in these TV shows that have not made it to the end. I will say, in terms of the line of succession for Egg, so someone actually asked this in the Discord, and we kind of laid it out. Shout out Simon the Nipple. And so right now we have Daeron II is king. The heir is Baelor, his firstborn son. Mm-hmm. Then the next 2 in line, so 2 and 3 in line, are then Baelor's 2 sons, because the sons of the firstborn come before the siblings of the firstborn. And then 4th in line is Baelor's brother Ares. 5th in line is Baelor's other brother Rhaegal. 6th in line is Rhaegal's son. And then 7th in line is Maekar, who is the 4th son of Daeron II. So Maekar is 7th in the line of succession. And then Egg is Maekar's 4th son. So then Egg is 11th in the line of succession at this moment.
Damn.
So, I mean, a lot will have to happen. We don't know if Egg's king tomorrow. Is he king in however many years? What happens in between all of that? So the line of succession right now is quite long to get to Egg eventually. So
yes. Yeah. And, I figured that too, Egg, he's not going to be king tomorrow, like you were saying. But, the first domino's got to drop eventually to get to that 11th seat. Is there a civil war that breaks out or something again? We went through the Blackfires, needed that history lesson last episode. Kyle, thank you for breaking that down. But it makes so much sense. So who knows? But all I know is next episode is going to start out so hot, and I don't know what's going to happen, man. I'm nervous and excited, and I feel like I'm going to be in that fight because I feel like I am there with Dunk. So I love what this show has done just in the first 4 episodes.
So when they put out at the end of episode 1, like that 5-minute, like on this season of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I watched it just because whatever, I know the story, and the scenes from the trial are crazy. They did a great job of like, you're in the mud, like you're with the helm that has like the small ass vision slit, and it's just chaos.
Yeah.
And this next episode, yeah, is going to be crazy in the best way possible.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, is it gonna be the whole episode? Like, is the whole episode, the whole 30 minutes just gonna be a fight? Or are we gonna have aftermath? I don't know, but there's only, what, 6 episodes this season?
Yeah, so we got 2 left. I wanna say combined runtime of those 2 might be 65 total minutes.
It's tough.
So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at the moment. So that is going to do it from a, like, scene by scene breakdown. I have there's a lot of lore right here at the end, and I'm gonna try to do this as efficiently as and entertainingly as possible because they tease us a little bit throughout this of a trial of 7 hasn't happened in Lionel Baratheon says, I believe, 100 years.
Mm.
According to my math, the actual year count is 170 years. Naturally, we have all of the information about the first trial of 7 that happened. So I have this description here of the trial, and then I've got 2-ish kind of fun facts. It's maybe 2.5. We'll see how they come out of my mouth when we get to that point. But so everyone knows that the first king of Westeros, the first Targaryen king, was Aegon the First. That's Aegon the Conqueror, who had 2 wives. What a guy. So he had his wife Rhaenys, who he was really, really in love with. And then he had his wife Visenya, who was kind of like, I guess you could say maybe like the Arya Stark of the situation, but also like Arya Stark mixed with Cersei Lannister, mixed with like Littlefinger, mixed with like every other kind of villainous schemer. So she was kind of more of this like, warrior princess in a way. So he's got the 2 wives. Maegor is his son by Visenya, his just wild card wife. So when Maegor becomes king, he's known as Maegor the First, also Maegor the Cruel. He is a wild man. So complete tyrant, crazy guy. He built basically the Red Keep, the castle that the Targaryens live in King's Landing. The classic story of him is that he built it and then he killed every single person that worked on it so that no one would know any of the secrets of it. Classy guy. So just to put a little perspective into who this guy is. So at the start of the Targaryen reign and then into this point, so this is the year 42 after the conquest. A little bit of context there. We are currently in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It is year 209 after the conquest. So again, that's like 170-ish years ago. Game of Thrones, the main show, is like 299 to like 300 years after the conquest. So it's 42 AC. And at this point, it's been nothing but conflict between House Targaryen and the Faith of the Seven, because the Targaryens are incestuous aliens. They are blood magicers and tyrants. And so the faith, the religion of Westeros is not really that cool with the Targaryens. The Targaryens have the dragons and the power, but the religion is kind of like, damn, these are kind of brother and sister fuckers. And we're not totally going with that. So after years of kind of a lot of this tension, and then Maegor being Maegor rather, basically it comes to a head where they being the religion, are kind of against Maegor's rule. And so they kind of put him in a situation of a trial by combat where it's like, okay, we have what's known as the Faith Militant. So that's like the army of the religious sect. So if you remember season 5, I think it is, with like the High Sparrow, and they have all like the, Lancel Lannister, and they're all shaved heads. But
Mm.
it's like that, but way cooler, where they're actual knights and they're like an army, and they wear armor and swords and stuff. So this squad basically rolls up to Maegor and is like, we're going to challenge you for your right to basically rule Westeros. They turn it into a trial of 7, and it happens. And he, being Maegor the First, was the only survivor out of the 14 from
Damn.
the first trial of 7, and he was in a coma for 30 days. So yeah, you're not wrong to be like, okay, who's gonna die? Like, obviously not everyone's making it out of this, because
Yeah,
the first time it
Jesus.
happened, 13 of the 14 died.
I mean, I'm worried about Baylor. I should be worried about everybody. I mean, the only one that's safe is obviously Dunk. Literally everybody else could die. I have no idea now. That's crazy that 13 died and one was in a coma for 30 days after.
Yep. And then continuing with Maegor the Cruel's reputation, he wakes up 30 days later. He was the rider of Balerion, the Black Dread at that point. His father, Aegon the Conqueror's dragon. He just hops on it immediately when he wakes up and just burns down the sept that's in King's Landing and tries to kill as many religious people as possible, which just creates this whole war, which we will not get into. But that is the context of the Trial of Seven. So a lot higher stakes there, but that's the last time it has happened. So that's just Arion just randomly pulling this kind of situation out of his butt. Now to the 2.5 fun facts. So we mentioned that the kind of guy on Dunk's team that's flying a little bit under the radar here is Sir Humphrey Beesbury. You mentioned that he is Sir Humphrey Harding, the guy with the broken leg. That's his brother through marriage, so his brother-in-law. House Beesbury, I just love this because, again, the little houses make the world feel so rich. So House Beesbury is a house from the Reach, which is where the kind of Tyrells are from. Obviously, you know what the Reach's deal is because of Game of Thrones Risk. But so their castle is called Honey Halt, and it's next to the Honeywine River. So not crazy that they're House Beesbury, but they're house words. So we have the Starks as, winter is coming as an example. So the House Beesbury house words are beware our sting.
Okay.
That's
Love
just
that.
funny to me. I like that, right?
Yeah.
But that's all to really set up this fun fact of in the first Trial of Seven ever, there was a member of House Beesbury that fought in the first Trial of Seven. So at this point now, House Beesbury and House Targaryen are the only two houses to participate in both Trial by Sevens in recorded history, which is just so random, but that's a thing.
That's awesome. Keeping the tradition alive. So wait, there's only been 2 Trials of Seven in recorded history? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, I mean, they could have been doing it for a while pre, the Targaryens, pre Aegon the Conqueror. Just not that I know of anything recorded. But yeah, I mean, that's the first time that it happened with Maegor the Cruel, and then now with Dunk the Lunk, Sir Duncan the Tall.
That's insane. I know my car had a line earlier to Arion saying, like, are you really choosing a 6,000-year-old tradition instead of fighting him? So maybe they did do it.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So that's what this is. Just the first recorded one happened to be the most recent one besides this.
Yeah, just as far as we know. I'm sure it happened a lot. It's just maybe they weren't at a point where they were writing this stuff down.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would make sense because my car's like, what the fuck's a Trial of Seven? So if they're not happening all the time, it makes sense that they don't know what it is.
Yeah. And then so this is where the 0.5 of the fun fact comes in. So the guy, the Brood of Bracken, Sir Otto Bracken, who stands up and farts, funny moment, but he gave up joining House Beesbury and House Targaryen as the only houses to compete, I guess, in both of the Trial of Sevens because one of his ancestors did participate in the first Trial of Seven. So there was a knight from House Bracken in the first one. So he farted that chance away, basically.
He's looking down at his descendant, just shaking his head, being like, you son of a bitch, man. I fought in the first one and you fart at the second one? Terrible.
Yep, totally. Big mistake. But the last fun fact I have here, and this is obviously the best one for last. So one of the combatants on Maegor's side, he was the only non-knight. So there was 13 knights and then this guy, and his name was Dick Bean.
What a name. That sounds like he could live in this time.
Just Dick Bean. Just out there giving it his best. Obviously he died, but shout out Dick Bean for getting in the arena with 13 knights.
He got the Bean name in the history books. So let's go.
Great point. We know it.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, Dick. Okay. Shout out to us because that is episode 4. 7. We're obviously will be back for episode 5 of what should be the actual Trial of Seven. The fate of Sir Duncan the Tall is on the line next week. I guess technically in 9 days from today. So we got the positive of the episode early. We get the negatives now on the other side of it that we got to wait a little bit longer for the next one. But obviously we'll be here for it in the next 2 episodes. We are Binge Empire, part of the Bingetown TV Podcast Network. The other shows on the Bingetown TV Podcast Network Top one is going to be The Core. That's where we cover everything on Apple TV. So obviously, Night of the Seven Kingdoms is on HBO. So we're on Binge Empire. Anything that's on Apple TV is going to be over on The Core. Right now, they're covering Hijack, but that's where you'll find coverage of Severance, of Pluribus, of Silo, Shrinking, Your Friends and Neighbors, all the good Apple TV stuff. And then eventually, naturally, when Brandon Sanderson's Beautiful World is brought to the small screen, that coverage will be over on The Core. We also have a podcast called Final Form, which is currently covering Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3. That's where we cover anime over on Final Form. And then lastly, Unreal is where we cover reality television. Right now, we are covering The Traitors, Season 4 US over on Peacock. So there's lots of coverage out there on the Bingetown TV Podcast Network, more than just A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, more than just Binge Empire. We've got a lot of other feeds, so be sure to check all of that out in the meantime. So until the next time, we are Binge Empire, and thank you so much for listening.